To start with the history and the stories, I have to go and look what the experts nowadays says about this cocktail. I started my research by reading this publication from an Esquire magazine from 2015, written by cocktail historian David Wondrich, and he says that Daisy in Spanish is margarita. Also says that it might have actually spawned the margarita as one of the ways to make a daisy, an American drink of the 1870s, involved citrus juice and orange liqueur. So first, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into the book, The History of Cocktails that he wrote to see what he continues saying about the margarita and the daisy. I went to Mr. Wondrick's book and I went specifically to the Daisy drink section, and he starts talking about the history of this cocktail, and by the end he starts talking or making this relation between the Daisy and the margarita. So I thought it was important for me to just give this background for the Daisy drink, and it says that the whiskey Daisy was introduced in a bar in New York, and it was something like the whiskey sour with the addition of seltzer. And he continues saying that by the end of the Prohibition, both kinds, the old orange liquor up kind and the newer grenadine rocks kind were in circulation. And he continues talking about the Daisy and making this relation between the Daisy and the Margarita when he says the sunrise tequila, tequila, lime juice, grenadine, a little creme de queso, ice, soda, in other words, a tequila Daisy modern type. And continues saying that if they were drinking them old school, you see, they were drinking tequila, orange liqueur, lime juice, and maybe a little splash of soda, and ordering them as margaritas. Well, here with these words, he's trying to make this relation that the margarita, due to the word, it comes or they were referring to a daisy cocktail at that time. So let's try to see furthermore how it develops this relationship between the margarita and the daisy cocktail. Continuing with David Wondrick's book, by the end of the daisy section, he shows two recipes, which the top one for will be the old school, which is from Jerry Thomas' 1876 cocktail book, and the bottom one, which is the new school, and it's from Hugo Esling from 1916. Uh, they are both calling for seltzer or sparkling water, which I'm pointing out right now because we gonna check out different cocktail books. Because at this point, I want to see the ingredients, how they evolve to become the margarita. I started with the 1862 Jerry Thomas cocktail book, and I found nothing at all for the daisies. Okay, after that book, I went to same Jerry Thomas cocktail book from 1876. The one that Mr. Wondrick uses to cite his old school recipe. And well, I found out that the Daisy drinks are on the appendix section. Maybe he got his hands just too late to put it on an index. And well, he calls for brandy, whiskey, gin, and rum daisies. and all have to be made in same as the brandy daisy. So this is the same recipe that David Wondrich uses in his book when he refers to the old school. And well, the brandy daisy is 3 or 4 dashes gum syrup, 2 or 3 dashes orange cordial, the juice of a half a lemon, 1 small wine glass of brandy, fill glass half full of shaved ice, shake well and strain into a glass and fill up with seltzer water from a siphon. And as you can see, we already talked about the seltzer water. And other thing that I want to point out is the orange cordial. David Wondrich says that he is orange liqueur, and the words, it might be very similar, cordial and a liqueur. However, we're gonna see later that Jerry Thomas, when he calls for an orange liqueur, most likely he calls for curacao, which means that this cordial is more of a orange syrup or orange flavored syrup, let's say it like that. Okay, my next book is 1882 Harry Johnson, Bartender's Manual and Guide for Hotels and Restaurants, in which Harry Johnson calls for 4 uh, daisy drinks, in which the first 3 are pretty much the same recipe. The fourth one, the Morning Daisy, it's much more of a single cocktail, in which he uses Scotch whiskey and the white of an egg. The first 3 recipes are pretty much made the same as the Brandy Daisy, so let's review this recipe, in which he calls for half a tablespoonful of sugar, 2 or 3 dashes of lemon juice, 1 squirt of seltzer water, half glass of chartreuse, fill up glass with ice, 1 glass of brandy, and you have to stir up well with a spoon. Place the fruit into a fancy bar glass, strain the ingredients into it, and serve. As you can see, the constant element is the sparkling water. In this case, is the seltzer water, which is the name of natural sparkling water. And he also calls for Jello Chartreuse, giving this yellow hue to the cocktail. The 1913 Harry Montag Bartender's Guide also includes the Daisy drink, in which he calls for brandy, gin or whiskey as a base spirit, and the recipe is the same for all 3. In just the gin version, you just substitute ginger ale for carbonated water, and the recipe, well, it's a small bar glass half full of fine ice, and gum syrup, the juice of lemon, curacao, orange cordial, and the base spirit. And well, you can see same, almost same as Jerry Thomas recipe. Here is incorporating the curacao, which is the orange liqueur. So this gives us a hint that the orange cordial is more of a syrup or something different than the orange liqueur, which is the curacao. We're gonna go ahead in time to 1930, and we're gonna review the book, The Savoy Cocktail Book, from Harry Craddock, in which he includes the daisies, and by the way, he includes them as a category or family of drinks. And in this category, he lists the gin daisy, the rum daisy, and the whiskey daisy, which are pretty different recipes from one another. As you can see, he's using grenadine for the gin daisy, and for the Santa Cruz rum, he uses maraschino or curacao. And for the whiskey daisy, he's only calling for gum syrup. One remaining or inconstant element, as we can see, is the soda water or the seltzer Apollinaris water. Apollinaris is a brand for natural sparkling water. So, as you can see, the whiskey daisy is more of a kind of like a whiskey sour with seltzer water. And the rum daisy, due to the Curacao employment, it resembles margarita ingredients. However, uh, a constant element is the soda water. Let's go further in time to 1948 and review the book The Fine Art of Mixing Drinks from David Embry. And as I'm gonna tell you later on, by this year, the margarita cocktail was already created, which I couldn't find within this book from Embry. And as for the daisies, he puts these drinks together with another category, which are the fixes, and says that there is little, if no difference between these two classes of drinks, and that which for the fix you would use pineapple syrup, and for the daisies you would use raspberry syrup or grenadine. And also continue saying that both drinks are of the sour type, employing citrus juices, fruit syrups, or liqueurs, and a spirituous liquor. The recipe he calls is it's the same for all the different daisies he calls. It's 1 part grenadine, 2 parts lemon or lime juice, and 8 parts gin. And says that you mix and pour into a prepared goblet as above indicated, and float 1 or 2 teaspoonfuls of yellow chartreuse on top. As the way to prepare this goblet, he says that the fix is regularly served with straws in a glass or a goblet filled with shaved or crushed ice. The daisy sometimes is strained into a Delmonico or a small highball glass, but it is also proper and, in my opinion, preferable to serve it with straws in a goblet, a stein, or, best of all, a silver mug full of fine ice. So as you can see, Embry's recipe is one of the few that doesn't call for sparkling water, but he's making an emphasis of the color of the cocktail and also to use a goblet full of fine ice. Chronologically, this is gonna be the last book that I'm gonna review. It's the 1950 Harry's ABC of Mixing Cocktails from Harry McElhan, in which he includes the Daisy drink, which he calls for the brandy, gin, rum, and whiskey Daisy, all made in the same as the brandy Daisy. And the recipe is 2/3 brandy, a sixth of grenadine syrup, the juice of half a lemon. You should shake well, strain, pour into double-sized cocktail glass, add sherry and other fruit in season, and a squirt of soda water. We can see just the squirt of the soda water as a reminiscence of this element through all the time, and also the most new element, the grenadine, to impart color to this cocktail. As I said, the last book was chronologically the last one. However, I saved this book to be the last that I'm gonna review. This is the 1937 Cafe Royale cocktail book, and is from W.J. Tarling. And I saved it because it has some additional information that I wanted to share or point out. And first, let's review the daisies. Here, Tarling includes a whole category for the daisy and only calls for two recipes, the gin daisy and the whiskey daisy. Both cases, he calls for soda water and the use of fine ice. And the information that I want to show you is this cocktail, picador cocktail, which is a quart of lime or lemon juice, a quart of Cointreau, and half tequila. These ingredients are almost it's the same as a margarita. We're just missing the salt. However, some bartenders say it doesn't count as an ingredient. It counts more as a garnish. But as you can see, Tarling is presenting this cocktail that resembles a margarita, and also it's talking about the Daisy cocktails, and they're very much different, you know. After we reviewed all these cocktail books through the history, the constant elements to elaborate this drink through all the cocktail books that we saw were sparkling water. We've seen this element since Jerry Thomas. The addition of an element that imparts color, the use of additional flavors besides the citrics. It was usually served with fine or very small pieces of ice. The use of a tall glass rather than a cocktail glass were some of the elements or the facts that we can say about this Daisy cocktail. As a conclusion on the Daisy cocktails regarding the margarita, and with all the facts that we previously saw for the Daisy, I can say that two things is what tying these two cocktails. First is the name, obviously, which margarita is Daisy in English. And the second thing is the Daisy recipe being so open to different interpretations give this idea that the margarita is an evolution from this cocktail. However, if we see that never in time in any bar was ordered a margarita de brandy or brandy margarita or gin margarita or margarita de gin, that didn't happen. So we can see that this is a misinterpretation. And if we want to see a direct evolution from the Daisy cocktail, a Mexican cocktail evolved from this recipe, we can check out this cocktail, which is the Paloma cocktail. And visually, we can say it's an evolution. You have the color, the ice, the the glass, and the elements. Well, it have fruit flavor additional from the citrics, and this would resemble more of a daisy than the margarita itself. I wanted to take a moment to talk about these brands of natural sparkling water. First, because it was a recurring element through all the recipes from these cocktail books, and second, because uh, due to the nature of these uh, sparkling waters being from a natural resource, makes them even more expensive than the standard ones, and back in those years were even more expensive. So it was an important element to incorporate in their cocktails.